Okay, so let's talk about the current status of digital technology in New Zealand. What are your views on the current status, where we're at? Um,
Mm. It's not good.
that's a great
Is where
start, right?
I'd
That's a
start
great
with that.
start.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
plenty of room for
Tell me more.
improvement.
Tell me more.
Um,
Why?
okay, so I think culturally we have a very poor respect for design
Yep.
in New Zealand,
Mm-hmm.
and we like to think of design as the sort of poor country cousin of build. A lot of people seem to think it happens as a consequence of building rather than being a deliberate activity.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the other part of that is that because of that, possibly, we're very site driven. A lot of decisions get made on the fly in the field that aren't accounted for. And that feeds all the way back to design, where we consider design once over lightly because, frankly, things are going to change in the field. So we're locked in a self fulfilling prophecy now.
So every design we get, you believe, is not constructible or buildable.
Yeah, and a part of that has to be owned by the fiscal part of it too. Like the money people of the world don't want to indemnify digital data. So as long as you can't indemnify it, you can't on-sell it. Ergo, it has no value. So now, design in itself, which takes place digitally in the
Yep.
modern world, is it's fallen in status. It's not as important.
Yeah. What are your views on that, mate?
For me, it's more a little bit downstream from that. And when I was very heavy in the construction industry, there was a lot of resistance to change.
Yep.
So, a model was just seen as some computer thing that didn't matter. The attitudes on site to adopting a new technology,
Well, it still is seen as something.
still like that.
Yeah.
Many times I was sort of wrapped around the knuckles for sitting in the office and, doing a design model for temporary works.
Yep.
And how temporary works interfaces with the main design so that we could actually build it.
Mm-hmm.
And, senior supervisor would come and tell me that I should be in the field sort of counting trucks on a notepad. And it's that type of attitude that sort of slows down progression in the digital adoption.
Yep.
Which ultimately, obviously, stops people from growing.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we're actually saying is we're actually far behind where we need to be in terms of digital technology in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. And modern structures are very, very complex things. So you can't express them in 2D. We're still locked in a level 1 BIM world, which is where the drawings are contractual and the model is for information only, which is by default saying the model doesn't matter. It's just that's really it's surrendering that entire design process to a nice to have.
Yeah.
But again, fundamentally, don't worry too much about it. Things are going to change in the field because we don't design to 100% anyway. It's a real problem.
Well, we've got more fundamental problems than that, I believe, because we actually consented for 60% design.
Yeah.
We've got way more problems. Yeah. And even our councils don't really promote digital technology for consenting, which I've never understood.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So if you look at Auckland Council, I'm going, why can't you actually provide a consent based off a 3D model?
Yeah.
Why do you need pages and pages of 2D drawings to get consenting done?
Yeah.
Never understood it.
No, that's right. Amongst all typical details as well, which we know typical details are they're detached from any real geometry.
Yeah.
It's a catalog item. It's a snapshot. This is what we intend.
Yeah.
But geometrically it may or may not be.
Yeah.
It was probably one of the hardest things in my career was to take a sort of a detail model and try and apply it onto a sort of design where this detail applies to these things.
Yeah.
And the minute you start actually modeling it and how we're going to build it, none of them fit together. There's obviously tons of clashes. And for me, a model, if you can't build this complicated puzzle, technically a building model is a complicated puzzle, or a whole construction project's a complicated puzzle. If you can't make all these parts fit together in a computer, you're never going to be able to do it in real life.
No way.
Not the way the designer intended, at least.
Yeah.
They might be able to chisel write it and, put things on site,
Which is where we excel here.
Exactly.
But she'll never be all right.
If engineers specified a certain detail for certain, let's say footings, and that's how they should be, and then there's heaps of clashes where they're too close together and they don't fit, and then we go and change it on site. That's not what the design intended, and then we introduce a whole bunch more problems that then knock on later on.
Can you give me a real life example where you've run into that situation, that exact scenario?
We found it a lot with when I worked on a project where we had a Japanese contractor, and the Japanese contractor had done sort of a layout of a wharf excavation, and the only information we had for that wharf excavation were sort of details of cross sections of what it should look like from a cross section. So when we basically put that into a design model, you can do that on a linear line for like a chainage, and say there's 200 meters, but then there's corners.
Yeah.
And then where the perpendicular pile faces interact, now that detail and that detail need to interface. So what does that look like? Almost like an upside down roof. And then, for instance, like the revetment that was adjacent to that was designed by another guy who also had just a typical cross section of what it should look like.
Yeah.
And where those two work faces interfaced, there was a massive sort of conflict on what goes where. Whose concrete beam is more important to go to this point in space where they both overlap. So,
but that's not something you figure out on site, is what we're trying to say.
Oh, you would figure it out when it's too late, when everyone's standing, scratching their heads, looking at it.
Yeah.
So we designed it, we modeled it, we saw there was an issue.
Yeah.
We were able to come up with suggestions based on the expertise we had on site, and then it was easy to rotate a 3D model in space and explain it to someone in 3D and be like, "Wow, that's how it should look."
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, we accept your change. Let's go. And then we could load that into an excavator to go and dig or get it set up correctly.
Yeah, fundamentally, it doesn't matter what problem you're trying to solve. It's always cheaper to solve it in an office on a desktop than it is in the field. When you've got hundreds of guys standing around, you've got concrete trucks rotating in the bays.
Yeah, your downtime on site.
That's right.
It's crazy.
But,
it's just unsustainable.
But our default mechanism here in New Zealand is to push those solutions out into the field.
Yeah.
We
let the guys on site figure it out.
We intentionally underbake design
Yeah.
with the intention that the guys in the field will sort out all the rough edges, when it should be the other way around. We should be reversing the polarity there. And it doesn't mean superseding the knowledge and experience of those who physically build things. Quite the contrary. It means bringing them into the office early enough so that they can advise the design process. So it's designed in the way that they intend to build it, not the other way around.
Yeah.
There's this, people get their hackles up with digital design in so much as, we've got a lot of experience, we don't want to be told how to build things. Quite the contrary. I want you to tell me how it should be designed. We need to bring that experience into the office as a force multiplier to get those guys to share that, to really bake that into the design. So when eventually we get all the way downstream and the drawings rotate out into the field, those issues have been signed off at the highest level in a practical way that's actually buildable. Yep.
So in short, what we're trying to say is we're far behind where we need to be.
Oh yeah, we're 180 degrees out. We've got a war. It's like a tale of two cities.
Yeah.
You've got the design office and the site office, and there's a real uncomfortable bridge between the two. When really the site office needs to be, the guys who physically build this stuff need to be
an integrated one unit.
Yeah, they need to be in the room. They need to be in the room earlier, working on the design, so that the digital model reflects what they want to do.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
I think we did that well at the W50 project when you've spoken to Matt Sanford in the past. So we had construction in the design office actually saying this is going to work, this is not going to work, and getting it done in the field.
The only job I worked in New Zealand that was on time.
Yep.
And under budget.
Happy to be a part of that one.
Yeah, me too.
Mm. Yeah, and I've had positive experiences when you run this like an ECI, when you bring the build team into the design office and you war game the entire setup and concept.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, the concept reflects the way the guys want to build it on site.
Yeah.
Before you even devolve into sort of develop design and that sort of carry on.